Hello, everybody. My name is Nicholas Pedrasky still, and joining me again is Jeff Hoogland.
Howdy.
Howdy, howdy. Today, now, we're going to talk about a list that people would much rather you had never come across. Uh, a lot of credit and hate for this deck list go to you in Yotul Burn, Blood Ruby Yotul Burn. So why don't you give us a core overview of probably set four's most hated ladder deck?
If I had to describe Yodel Burn in two words, they would be brutal and efficient. The deck is just one of the most consistent decks you will find in the Hex format, even still with set 5, just because essentially every card in the deck does the same thing. It deals damage to your opponent in some way, shape, or form. Thanks to Yodel's ability, which for 2 charges allows any non-combat damage you deal until end of turn to deal 1 additional point, it even means our resources are essentially dealing damage to our opponent every single turn. The core of any burn deck is built on top of the cards that kind of push damage consistently, our prime damage sources, and in this deck those are composed of Ghostblade Duelist, which is a 1/1 for 1 that activates to deal 1 damage to each opposing champion. Ebony Pawn, which is a 2-cost artifact that does the same effect. I've often been known to say that Ebony Pawn is secretly the best card inside of Yodel Burn, because not only does it consistently push damage every single turn, but it's hard to interact with. There aren't a lot of people that have ways to deal with artifacts, even post reserves, and when they do, they don't have 4 or more copies of ways to deal with artifacts. We always have 4 Ebony Pawns in our deck. Past these, we also have Arena Regular, which on top of being a 2/1 that can attack inside of combat, it also deals damage when we gain charges, so that makes our shards deal additional damage past what our champion ability is doing, and that also means our crackling bolts become more damaging, and our blood infusion devices deal damage just when we put them into play, because all these cards are gaining us shards, or gaining us charges.
Which is
To top all...
which is just a slew of already powerful synergy, and then on top of that you were going to say, and I cut you off.
You're fine. To top it all off, we have the most efficient troop in the deck, which is the Whirling Brutalizer. When you activate your champion ability, this card comes down, and if it was preceded by a Ghostblade Duelist or an Ebony Pawn, your opponent's going to take a point of damage, and then this Whirling Brutalizer is going to attack and deal another 6 points of damage when it comes down in the 3rd turn of the game. What I often like to refer to as the hidden mode on Whirling Brutalizer is that it's important to note that he also deals damage to troops that have already been dealt damage in a single turn. So often, if your opponent puts like a 4/4 in front of you, you can burn that 4/4 and then attack with your Whirling Brutalizer and finish it off, so it's not going to be able to block our 3/2 that's pushing damage.
Excellent. So set 5 Hero Fall launched recently, and the deck got a couple of upgrades, I would say. Fireball is now in here. Probably the happiest situation in the whole deck is now the Well of Hatreds, as opposed to... I believe the deck was originally jamming 4 Quashridge Rubble and 4 Shards of Hatred to try to fix for a rather low amount of blood needed.
Yeah, we also had more blood shards than we play now, which wasn't pleasant because you're a base Ruby deck kind of splashing blood for the Yodel activation and a couple of powerful blood cards. So our resources getting more efficient, and Fireball being another 1-cost deal 3 is powerful. But really the best thing that happened to Yodel Burn with set 5 was the fact that most of the best hate cards for this deck were the gems that rotated. The Life Drain gem was a huge beating for this deck on, Borean Root Fathers and Cosmic Shamans, and those don't exist in the set 5 format anymore since all of our gems changed. So a lot of the best cards against this deck are no longer there to be utilized against it.
Yeah. How does this fare against the other 2 main aggro decks in the format, Mono Ruby and the newly surfacing Blue Burn deck?
I think it's very close against the Blue Burn deck. We're both doing similarly powerful things. I think this deck is moderately more consistent than the Blue Burn deck, but it's probably a little bit less powerful on an overall power scale. The Mono Ruby Angus deck can be a little bit difficult for this deck to deal with, mostly because there are larger threats like Matriarch and Mama Yeti we can't deal with like we can Vampire Kings by dealing 4 points of damage to them with Burning Tendrils and Crackling Bolts with our champion ability. Kind of transitioning into the sideboard while we're talking, or the reserves while we're talking about this matchup, we have 4 copies of Casualty of War here, and that's really there to shore up that mono ruby aggressive matchup. This card kills vampires, it kills Mama Yetis, it kills it misses Matriarch because she's under retreat, but it kills everything else in the mono ruby deck, and it kills all of the vampires. So just very powerful removal.
And is the 2 cost really an important justification over, say, kill? Or, I mean, obviously Hero Fall would be very tight with the low amount of blood in the deck, but kill or reap?
Yeah, Hero Fall is pretty tight, and one of the reasons that I really like Casualty of War is that it almost saves a lot of Yodel players from themselves. There's a lot of decks that you don't want to be bringing in this type of removal against, and you have to have a really big justification to board this card in that's not dealing damage to your opponent in the late game. Because what you have to realize is even in matchups where this card is good, there's going to be games where your Angus opponent's at 2 or 3 life, and you draw for the turn, and it's this Casualty of War, and it's like if it had been, a Crackling Bolt or a Burn or anything else, they'd have died. So there's a very real cost to including these cards that aren't dealing damage to your opponent in your deck, where you want every card to deal as much damage as possible.
Excellent. The Nightmares, I seem to remember, came out and came back in multiple times in the formulation of Yodelus. Are they back in for any particular reason now, or are they just a...
Nightmare is the type of card that can really help you swing other aggressive matchups like the 2 you were just talking about. This is kind of an effect that not only kind of swings that life total race, they go down 3 and we go... If we activate Yodel, they'll lose 3 and we'll gain 3 if we damage them before we play this. That can often be more than enough to swing a race that 6-point life swing. Not to mention they'll be able to block or attack on top of that, swinging even more points of life in your favor.
Excellent. Well, I know nobody is going to want to see Yodel on the other side of the table, but on the off chance that you do, here are a couple of things that you should be looking out for. Thank you again for your time, Jeff, and good luck to everybody playing today.